Welcome to Business Recipe. Every business has a recipe. Here's theirs. Today's recipe: the part of the company your government didn't have to buy. Bill Farrier has spent 30 years inside the same Coke plant in Clairton, Pennsylvania. He's the president of his union local. The vice president of that same local looks at the same deal and sees the opposite thing. On June 18, 2025, a Japanese company paid $14.9 billion for an entire American steelmaker. It still isn't the only one holding a vote. Here's the recipe. Nippon Steel, Japan's largest steelmaker, spent a year and a half trying to buy United States steel. One president blocked the sale. The next one didn't. That part you've probably heard. Here's the part almost nobody's unpacked: what Nippon actually walked away owning, and what it didn't. Ingredients: who blocked this deal, and the exact clause that let the next president undo it. Method: the single legal document that made 100% sale, not quite 100%. Result: a veto that's already been used. Once on a plant most Americans have never heard of. And who ate it? 5 steelworkers in the same river valley, who can't agree on whether any of this actually protects them. Hold on to that disagreement. It's the whole point. Every recipe starts with what's already in the kitchen. U.S. Steel had carried the name of the American steel industry for 122 years. The company Andrew Carnegie and J.P. Morgan built into the literal template for American industrial power. By December 2023, when Nippon Steel offered $14.9 billion for it, full price, no discount, U.S. Steel's own executives were telling shareholders they needed new capital just to keep competing. Securing a buyer, the company said, wasn't a threat to American steelmaking. It was what kept the furnaces lit. 1,000 miles from that boardroom, in Clairton, Pennsylvania, the math looked different up close. Bill Farrier had spent 30 years doing maintenance work inside the Clairton Coke Works, the country's largest coking facility, and the reason the mill town exists at all. Farrier became one of the loudest voices against the sale, and not for the reason you'd guess. "There's no solidarity with these guys," he said, not about Nippon, about his own union's leadership, for not fighting harder while the deal was still undecided. In January 2025, President Biden signed an executive order blocking the acquisition, citing credible evidence that it could impair national security. Buried in that same order was one more sentence: reserving his authority to issue further orders if circumstances changed. Nobody in that room read it as anything but boilerplate. It wasn't. Here's the method, and it starts with a clause nobody thought would matter. In April 2025, the new administration ordered a fresh, confidential review of the deal, from scratch, in 45 days. Legal analysts would later call this a first. No president had ever reopened a national security case a previous president had already closed. On June 13th, President Trump signed a new order clearing the sale. On one condition: U.S. Steel would have to sign a national security agreement and issue something the filing calls a golden share. Here's what's actually in the SEC filing, because the agreement itself was never made public. One single share of stock, handed to the U.S. government, that pays no dividend and costs the government nothing. In exchange, the president holds a permanent consent right over U.S. Steel's biggest decisions: closing plants, moving the headquarters, changing the name, shipping jobs overseas, buying up a competitor. Read that list again. It doesn't say the government owns U.S. Steel. It says the government has to say yes first. Governments have done something like this before. Britain invented the golden share in the 1980s, and France, Italy, Germany, and Brazil all copied it. European courts eventually struck several of those down as illegal, but every one of those was a real equity stake. This one isn't. It's control, with none of the ownership. 2 separate law firms, reviewing the filing independently, reached the same conclusion. Nothing quite like it had ever been required in a CFIUS case before. The deal wasn't won quietly either. Nippon and U.S. Steel also sued their rival bidder, Cleveland Cliffs, alleging an illegal campaign to sink the sale. Both sides dropped it by September. But the golden share wasn't the first promise Nippon made to these workers. 9 months earlier, before any of this existed, A labor arbitration board had already ruled Nippon owed the union $1.4 billion in written contractual investment inside their own plants. Enforceable through the same grievance process the union had already tested once, challenging this very sale, back in 2024. The golden share doesn't have a grievance process. It has a president. So the only honest way to know if it's real is to wait for someone to actually test it. Here's what came out of the oven. In September 2025, 3 months after the deal closed, U.S. Steel quietly told about 800 workers at its Granite City, Illinois plant that production would stop in November. The company would keep paying them. It just wouldn't make steel. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick found out, called U.S. Steel CEO David Burritt directly, and told him the administration wouldn't allow it, that the president would invoke the golden share. Lutnick on paying workers to make nothing. Nonsense. Within days, U.S. Steel reversed the shutdown. Craig McKee, president of the Granite City Union Local, put it simply, "We need a future. Whatever they give us, we're willing to do the work." 2 months later, the arrangement got a permanent address. William Kimmett, a trade lawyer, not a steelworker, not an elected official, was named the president's standing designee on the golden share. A second commerce official, David Shapiro, took the board seat. So the veto is real. Nobody who watched Granite City's shutdown order come down then get rescinded inside the same month can seriously argue otherwise. Which is exactly why it deserves the strongest possible case for it. Before we look at what that case doesn't cover. Before we go further, the strongest case for trusting this thing, because it deserves the full argument, not a straw man. Granite City wasn't theoretical. It was 800 real jobs, saved with no lawsuit, no taxpayer cost, and no delay. Lutnick calls the golden share perpetual, and legally that's not just spin. It's written permanently into U.S. Steel's own capital structure, filed with the SEC, and grounded in a national security law dating back to 1950, broad enough that the one court to test its limits found a president's national security judgment isn't something a judge gets to second guess. This isn't a handshake. It's a security instrument that will still exist long after everyone in this video has left office, retired, or passed away. Congress, at least on paper, kept its own oversight role over how the agreement gets enforced. Here's the problem Granite City doesn't solve. It took one commerce secretary, one phone call, one CEO in 1 week. No court reviewed it. No hearing was held. And when a reporter asked the Commerce Department directly whether perpetual survives a change in president, they declined to answer. The instrument is permanent. Nobody in Washington will confirm whether the will to use it is. That's not a reason to dismiss what happened in Illinois. It's a reason not to assume it happens the same way again automatically. Remember the man from the top of this video. Bill Farrier is president of USW Local 1557 at the Clairton Coke Works. Richard Tikey is that local's vice president. Same plant, same union, same information. And on this, they don't agree at all. Once this hot strip mill is done, Tikey says, you think they're going to shut down a $2 billion hot strip mill in 10 years? No, they're going to keep it running. Nippon's 10-year Pennsylvania production guarantee is what moved him. Brian Pavlak, 25 years at the same Coke Works, voted for Obama twice, then Trump 3 times. He says it was tariff policy, not the golden share, that changed his mind. And he built a Facebook group, Steelworkers for Trump, that's grown past 2,000 members. Andrew Macy feels it differently, a sense of a future where prior to a year ago you didn't know, but he says it carefully, still carrying what he calls the trauma of the explosion that killed 2 of his co-workers, Timothy Quinn and Stephen Menifee, roughly 2 months after the deal closed. Nothing connects that explosion to the sale. Everything about it explains why nobody at that plant treats any of this lightly. Richard Lattanzi, mayor of one of the Mon Valley's mill towns, didn't hedge about what the whole region had riding on it. If the deal didn't go through, the Mon Valley is dead. Bernie Hall, who runs the whole district for the union, opposed the deal from the start. A year later, all he'll commit to is this. I tell people it's still early. Things don't happen overnight. This is exactly the kind of mechanism this channel exists to slow down and actually explain. If that's useful to you, subscribing helps more people find it. Now for the turn. The golden share and that $1.4 billion investment pledge get talked about like they're the same kind of promise. They're not. The $1.4 billion is written into a labor contract. If Nippon doesn't deliver it, the union can file a grievance and force the issue through arbitration. The same process. On the same contract they already tested once, when they challenged this very sale back in 2024. The golden share doesn't belong to the union at all. It belongs to the president. Farrier can't invoke it. Tikey can't invoke it. Bernie Hall, running an entire district of the union, can't invoke it. Only one office in the country can. And Granite City proved that office will use it this time. That's the disagreement underneath the disagreement. Tikey's optimism is a bet that whoever holds that office keeps picking up the phone. Farrier never said he distrusts Nippon's promises specifically. He said he distrusts how hard anyone fought for a better deal in the first place. A veto that depends on someone else choosing to make a phone call is exactly the kind of promise that argument was always about. A share that lasts forever, held by an office that changes every 4 years. That's not a contradiction. It's the entire design. 3 signs this pattern shows up far beyond one steel mill. Sign 1. Read what happens after a deal closes, not just the headline that says it closed. U.S. Steel's sale was final on June 18, 2025. The government's actual seat at the table, a named designee, a board member, didn't exist until 5 months later. Closed and settled are not the same word. Sign 2. Separate control from ownership. Nippon holds the equity, the profit, the loss, the balance sheet. The golden share holds none of that and outranks all of it anyway. When you're evaluating who really runs something, follow the veto, not the stock certificate. Sign 3. Separate a promise you can enforce from a promise you can only hope gets used. The steelworkers' $1.4 billion is a contract, backed by a grievance process they control. The golden share is a discretion, backed by whoever wants to make the call that week. Both are real. Only one of them belongs to the people it's supposed to protect. You're not looking for who signed the biggest check. You're looking for who's still allowed to say no. A year after the sale, Local 1557's own 2 officers still haven't come around to each other's view. Farrier declined to be interviewed for the 1-year retrospective. Tikey's still waiting on that hot strip mill. The golden share is still sitting inside U.S. Steel's capital structure, right where the SEC filing put it, untested again for now, until the next Granite City. If this changed how you read the next foreign company buys an American icon headline, that's what this channel is for. Subscribe to Business Recipe. Next time, the company that took a federal bailout to save American trucking jobs and went bankrupt anyway. Today's recipe, complete. So, what business should we crack open next? Drop the company name in the comments. We read them. If you want more case studies like this one, subscribe. New recipe every Tuesday.